Joining me now, Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog, and Ari Rabin-Havt, host of The Agenda and a former advisor to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Ari, to you first. I want to play for you a couple of statements about the threat of ISIS and the U.S. plans to combat that organization. Let's listen, and then I'd like your reaction after we listen to this.
This is not a situation where it's the United States against ISIL. The fact is, ISIL has indicated that they're ready to go to war against the world. And this president, as is expected of American presidents, is stepping up to lead an international coalition to confront that threat and to deny ISIL a safe haven. And ultimately, this international coalition will be responsible for degrading and destroying ISIL. So I think what you could conclude from this is the United States is at war with ISIL in the same way that we are at war with Al-Qaeda and its Al-Qaeda affiliates all around the globe.
We will not have American combat forces on the ground fighting as we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is what I think the American people think of when they think of a war. So I think this is very different from that. But nonetheless, we'll be dealing with a significant threat to the region, to American personnel in the region, and potentially also to Europe and the United States. And we'll be doing it with partners.
Ari, it seems difficult for the administration to speak with one voice on this. Yesterday, of course, Dennis McDonough shows up on the Sunday show saying, yes, we are at war. John Kerry, who kind of started all this off, doubled back to say we are at war. What's going on within the administration, Ari?
Look, I think foreign policy and policies around security is hard. I think it's clear we are at war. I think that's the right answer. We are certainly engaged in active bombing efforts. I don't think that war necessarily necessitates, I should say, troops on the ground. I think the American people aren't willing to accept that reality, and I think and the American people aren't willing to accept that solution, and that is why we are executing this policy the way we are.
Let's turn to Javier. Your take on this, Javier.
Well, look, obviously, we need boots on the ground. We already have boots on the ground. Rice is saying that, hey, we don't want to put the type of military component in against ISIL that we did before. But look, we're going to need to. Like I said, we already have advisors on the ground. Barack Obama's failed foreign policy is pretty much, it is what it is, and they don't know what they're actually doing politically and militarily. So for them to, like, look, case in point, President Obama refuses to call ISIL what it is, an Islamic radical group, but he does refer to them as ISIL, which it's an acronym for Islamic State of the Levant. Go figure. So look, again, we're going to need to put boots on the ground. Every single military advisor and former military personnel you see on, as a pundit, you see on television shows, will tell you you need to have military personnel on the ground. You can't just count on the Kurds. You can't just count on the Syrian army to do so.
Ari, even the choice of the acronym, Javier just touched on it, ISIL as compared to ISIS. There's some thinking that the reason the administration avoids using ISIS is it would concede that the organization is in Syria and somehow redound to the political disadvantage of the president, who, of course, famously referred to this group, 6 months ago, as the, quote, JV team.
I think that's reading in a little bit too much. I mean, frankly, though, here's what I'd like to know. Who's going to pay for this? You can cut the domestic discretionary budget to zero, and you're still not going to pay for this. So, Javier, whose taxes are you going to raise? Or are you okay going into more debt for this? Because if you want boots on the ground, you're talking about $1 trillion. Where are you going to get it?
Obviously, it's going to come from us, because you don't seem to mind any of the Democrats that's coming from the American people. Again, where's the money going to come from, you ask? The American people, like they always do.
So you're okay with the tax increase for this, or are you okay with an ISIL?
President Obama is going to tax us regardless of what it is. They're going to increase cigarette
tax.
President
Obama can't tax anybody. Congress has the power to tax.
Right, he's going to push for it. He's going to push for it, just like he's pushing for. He's pushing for that $500 million package, which is including, which would mean. which would include taxing people. This is the MO the Democrats and you guys always push for, is pay for this, pay for this. What about Obamacare? How are we going to pay for that? He's pushing.
Obamacare is deficit.
Right. So everything we talk about.
Let me bring this back, because we could go off on financing and curious numbers and what different agencies are saying. Rather than numbers, let's listen to the president's words. Even though he last week asked for an initial down payment of $5 billion to take on ISIS, here is what he had to say in his weekly address.
Thanks to our military and counterterrorism professionals, we took out Osama bin Laden, much of al-Qaeda's leadership in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and leaders of al-Qaeda affiliates in Yemen and Somalia. We've prevented terrorist attacks, saved American lives, and made our homeland more secure. Today, the terrorist threat is more diffuse from al-Qaeda affiliates and other extremists, like ISIL in Syria and Iraq.
Javier, do you agree with the president? Are we actually more secure from the threat of terrorism today?
He's delusional. He's hanging that fedora on he's hanging his bin Laden fedora on the American people like this. He is, because of him taking out bin Laden, I'm sorry, it was actually the special forces already on his trail. He's taking this total credit, and he thinks this is the end-all solution. President Obama's, again, his foreign policy has failed the American people, and again, we are not safer now. He has not diffused it. He told us before that al-Qaeda was destroyed, or they didn't exist. So guess what? They're back, and now they're back in the form of ISIL. I don't buy his story. I don't buy anything he's going to tell us about this foreign policy moving forward.
Ari, in terms of a commander-in-chief trying to take stock, was the president simply trying to offer an overview to say we've had these successes to inspire confidence as a prelude to what's coming next?
I think actually you just spelled out exactly what I was going to say, JD. I think that's exactly what he's doing. I think he's giving a prelude to what's going to come next. I think there are numerous steps. And look, I think we are in a safer environment than we were a decade ago. And I think we've felt that safer environment, and Javier obviously feels differently.
Right.
But I believe the American people are safer.
Well, as we know, in less than 50 days, a midterm election, the former Speaker of the House, now the Democratic leader in Congress, Nancy Pelosi, offered a very interesting interpretation of things to come. Let's listen to it.
What would change? There's the filibuster there anyway. They don't pass anything. It's completely gridlocked. Why do I care if they lose the Senate?
It would be very important for the Democrats to retain control of the Senate. Civilization as we know it today would be in jeopardy.
Civilization as we know it today would be in jeopardy. A minute and a half left, gentlemen. We are used to hyperbole on the campaign trail, but Javier, is this the ultimate Pelosiism?
No, I think she once mentioned that the Republican Party is the party of Ebola. Again, this is their MO. When they have nothing else to talk about, nothing of substance to talk about, they're going to front of name calling and using this type of hyperbole to instill fear in Americans. This is their MO.
All right, Ari, you want to double down on what Nancy said? The end of Western civilization as we know it. About a minute left.
I certainly hope not. But look, politicians always use hyperbole. It's clearly hyperbole. I think this election is important, just like every election is important. And she was on a comedy show and made a statement that I think, was a bit of a hyperbole, but it's nothing more than I see in the DCCC fundraising emails anyway.
Oh, but in this venue, it was more of a humorous observation?
I don't know if it was humorous. I think she was in a loose format and was adapting to that. It's clearly not the end of Western civilization. But
Pelosi just showed us
politics
she's just a
and
joke.
hyperbole go together.
All right. Well, gents, on that, we will end it. That note of consensus about hyperbole. To Javier and Ari, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, JD.
Nancy Pelosi. The end of Western civilization as we know it if Republicans take control of the Senate? Why don't you tweet me your comments on Ms. Pelosi's comment at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum.